I promised you that we had another very special guest coming in, and we've got Todd Roehr from Minehouse. Todd, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thanks, Maddie. And thanks for bringing back Good Morning Vail. We've missed that a lot here at Minehouse. All my guests at Minehouse miss seeing your show, so we're looking forward to getting that back on the cable and seeing your bright, shining faces and all the information you guys give it to all of our guests, for all of our tourists that come to the Vail Valley of the Eagle County.
We're excited to finally be back. We need to give a special shout out to Danielle for making everything happen.
All right.
Seriously,
yes.
the
right.
fearless leader over there.
It is great, yes.
We're super excited to be back. And speaking of super exciting things, you've been doing something super exciting.
Yeah, so last year, before all the coronavirus kind of stuff came out, November 2019, we had basically come up with the ideas that of how to prevent age-related neurodegenerative processes like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and a whole bunch of other things that have different names like that. And we made the announcement here at that we had made those discoveries and we were going to work on that. And then it was difficult to work on those things last year because a lot of things were closed and the labs and stuff we were going to work with were closed, and et cetera. But and we brought the announcement out December 26th, and then some physicians in Wuhan announced that there was a virus going around on December 30th. So we kind of got lost in the process there. But the thing we wanted to basically come back and talk about eventually was basically a new way of thinking about neurodegenerative processes that are age-related, and probably the stuff that we want to use, the medications we use will probably be useful also in traumatic brain injuries. So people that have big accidents on the ski slopes or the football players or that kind of stuff. And the idea behind this is preventing disease rather than waiting for a really bad problem and saying, oh well, mom, dad doesn't look so good, or old folks like me don't look so good, but to prevent those kind of things. And so the terminology that we're going to introduce is something called dopamine responsive neurodegenerative diseases. And we have an acronym for that. It's called DRAiNED, because that's kind of the way us older folks, you're a young person, you don't have to worry about this. We're going to try to prevent any problems you or your families might have as well. And not everybody that gets older gets demented. So the terms that are usually, you hear senile actually just means old. All right, it actually doesn't mean having a cognitive problem. So you can be senile, you can be 100 years old and have a perfectly normal brain. But about half of the population of the world will develop a problem with a neurodegenerative process that can lead to problems with cognitive function as well as motor functions. And rather than waiting until and we've now looked at the biochemistry, the history of how these disease processes have occurred. We've gone back and reviewed the literature going back 200 years and come up with this new framework on how the brain works, which we'll talk about eventually, not today, but on another talk. But also how to prevent these age-acquired processes. So, and the substance that we're going to look for is dopamine. So I'm a retired physician, so I can't help you directly write the prescriptions and stuff. So it's very important that anybody that has any kind of issue, go and talk to your own physician, talk to your family physician, and have somebody that works with you directly. The other thing that's up there is the Minehouse Scholars. So this is a new program that we're expanding upon to bring scientists to talk to us here in the Vail Valley and come on Good Morning Vail and tell the world basically the advances in the research that is behind these theories and what we're doing to try to prove that actually dopamine and related substances are very valuable in the brain. So. Been chatting a lot here.
I know.
I'm taking all your thunder here.
No, you're totally fine. I'm just so
cool.
excited that you're so excited and that you've done all of this research and you've put all of this time in. And so now we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of how you came up with some of these things. This is the first graph that we're showing right here. Right. It's right behind us. It's right in front of us. So. Sure.
Yeah, I can see it as well, sir, so I don't have to look behind us. But basically, there's a guy named Mike Roizen who wrote the book Real Age. Mike Roizen, a good friend of mine, he's a board-certified anesthesiologist and internist. He happens to be Oprah's physician, so that's kind of how a lot of how he got introduced to the rest of the world. But he wrote this book called Real Age, and he looked at a number of things that actually would slow the progression of aging. And I recommend his book highly, and he's a great guy, great friend of mine. And we brought him in different places to give his talk and his seminars and that kind of stuff. But basically, the idea is that all of your physiologic functions more or less deteriorate with age, and all of our physiologic functions seem to peak around age 30, and then they go down slowly. So there's kind of a normal curve, which you would see off to the right there. That's the stuff above the pink. That's kind of like normal people. If you have a genetic abnormality or something that predisposes you to disease, then your age-relating process may be a little bit quicker. And in the past, we've always looked at we wait till somebody gets really sick or they have an obvious illness, and then we start treating them. And once we explain fully why these molecules work, dopamine and the catecholamines work. The idea is, instead of waiting until somebody's really sick and trying to slow the progression from there, is to find markers that come on a little bit earlier, whether it's a genetic problem or there's a group that has been looking at other markers like constipation in older people, and there's a host of things that we can look at. So before you're so sick that you can't function, that's dementia. It means you can't actually do some cognitive process of life. You can't do one of the activities of daily living. Before you reach that process, people, for the most part, know that they're having a problem. And those are the folks that we would start treating earlier. So like me as an example, when I was in my early 40s, I have a family predisposition for Parkinsonism. And when I started noticing that I was having troubles using my hands as an anesthesiologist, I thought, well, it's probably not the best idea to be sticking needles, within a millimeter of somebody's nerve anymore. I don't really want to hurt anybody, and started taking the medications that are for Parkinsonism. And there's been a lot of research going back to first started giving a drug called Levodopa back in 1969. And we've done a lot of improvements of treatments for Parkinsonism and that class of medications. We've done a lot of research since 1969, and then I've gone back and read loads and loads and loads of research, and come up with all these ideas. And so one of the problems that we have as far as getting the whole theory brought together is that biochemists, I'm a biochemist originally, is my undergraduate degree. Biochemists don't tend to talk to anatomists. Anatomists don't tend to talk to animal researchers. Animal researchers don't tend to talk to clinicians, and then clinicians, neurologists don't talk to each other that much as well. So you got all these groups that are doing parallel research, and it's hard to get any one entity, because people have busy lives and they're trying to advance their careers and that kind of thing. It's hard for all of that, for any one person to kind of like bring all this stuff together. Well, since I retired kind of younger in life than a lot of folks, I had opportunity to go spend 10 years in a library. When anecdote, I had a professor from Stanford stay with us here last week, and I told him when I interviewed for medical school at Stanford, the chairman of microbiology came over and gave a talk, and he said there's nothing like 2 months in the library, there's nothing like 2 years of work in the lab to avoid 2 months in the library. So there's a lot of research out there that's been done. We don't always understand the context of it, but instead of spending 100 years of doing research, I spent 10 years in the library looking up all this stuff. And then once finally you get the idea that something's right, you start making predictions. You say, well, if X is true, then Y must be true. And I've never heard of this before, but you go and do a literature search, and all of a sudden, wow, that prediction was true. Well, if that's Y is true, then Z must be true. Well, somebody had to look at that, and you go, do the research, do the literature research, and you go, holy cow, I'm starting to make predictions based upon the entire theory. So, and I haven't found anything yet that really conflicts with the theory. There's a lot of, physicians and scientists have a lot of discussion about them. That's the scientific process. We constantly challenge ideas because we want to have the right idea and have the best idea. But the idea that you should be using globally should explain all of the data and all of the research and all of the information that is available. And the theory that we have basically explains and incorporates all of the data that I can find. So I'm looking forward to getting these ideas out and getting more discussion because I think that will lead to actually people realizing that these catecholamines are very important in the brain for a number of reasons, and if we can increase the amount of catecholamines in the brain, that's a preventive aspect of neurodegenerative processes. So.
I mean, so much information to unfold just
I know. I hope much. So.
Few minutes that we just were chatting about it. But so what you're doing right now, and even with yourself, is you're taking a medicine to help you kind of slow the roll. And what you're saying in a shorter term is basically if you start taking this medicine, whether you have these genetic triggers, you have that genetic mark of, okay, Alzheimer's runs in my family's DNA, or dementia runs in my family's DNA, then you can start this process to help slow your own degeneration of your brain down with this one medication.
That would be the theory, yeah. So you see the slide behind us. Catecholamines are a group of molecules. There's 3 that are naturally occurring. Epinephrine, that a lot of people call adrenaline because it's from the adrenal gland that just sits above your kidney. So epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine are all the naturally occurring catecholamines that are biologically active within the body. They're active in the brain. They're also active throughout on your muscles. They're active upon your neurons. They're active upon not just skeletal muscles, but smooth muscles as well, like the heart, bowel, that sort of thing. And so those are the 3 molecules that are naturally occurring. Now, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine are in the brain, in different parts of the brain, but they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So you have a barrier between your brain and the rest of your body, so that when you take in certain substances that your brain uses as signaling, you don't mess up your signaling. So those medicines you can't, those drugs you can't take, those compounds you can't actually give to somebody. But levodopa, the precursor to that, you can give that, and it does cross the blood-brain barrier. And like I said, since 1969, we've been looking at perfecting the chemistry and the delivery of that system and of dopamine to the brain, and have come up with a drug called Sinemet was the original one, and now it's a generic form called Carbidopa levodopa. And the reason that these drugs these substances called catecholamines, excuse me, are effective at preventing the neurodegenerative processes is because when you get a benzene ring or a 6-carbon ring, and it grabs an oxygen, they tend to stack by themselves. It's a process called pi stacking. So if you remember back from your high school or junior high or wherever you took chemistry, there's certain electron orbits around molecules, and so the first one is the S shell, and the second one is the P or pi one. And so all of these molecules will do what we call pi stacking. And I'm going to run out of time here pretty quick.
Yeah,
so
we're running out really quickly here, but I mean, so much great information.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to do this again and maybe get through the rest of the slides because there's a few more.
We'll have a lot more things to talk about. So,
okay, perfect. Yeah. Todd, thank you so much for coming in.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Make sure that you check out Mind House if you're looking for a place to stay and some great information. Also, if you just want to hear some more information about this, you can always go stay at the Mind House to see Todd and everyone there. We are so excited about today's show. It went by so quickly. I can't believe how fast it flew by. Tune in tomorrow. We're excited to see you tomorrow morning.